transgender game developers, transgender programmers, transgender engineers, like just trans people in STEM careers. There's something going on here. And I gotta own it. I'm trans and I'm a game developer, so this is me in every way, and I can't escape this. Apparently, it's a thing. I know for me, like for old game developers, there's a handful of us who go back to the old days, who go way back, and the most famous is Dani Bunten, who created the game Mule. Also, Jamie Fenton, I believe, created Gorf. Pretty impressive resume of vintage coin-op games. So what's going on here? How did this happen? What's the phenomenon? And I sort of think about myself, and the thing is for me, I never really chose engineering. That's what my situation was. My parents were both science type people in college. My mother was a chemistry major. My father was a mechanical engineer. And for me, after graduating high school, my father had just decided I was going to take engineering in college. There was no question about this. I had I think it's an Asian thing a little bit, but by chance I got interested. I mean, not by chance, but I did get interested in electronics and radio. So I didn't. It wasn't a problem actually. I majored in electrical engineering because it was kind of my thing. My father was more. My father was a mechanical engineer, and he was the car guy. But I'm hopeless. I'm hopeless with car things and tools and stuff. I don't know. I'm not sure what it is. So I was never going to be working on cars. It wasn't my thing. And I don't think my father was quite into electronics, but he came around to this, like, electrical engineering and not mechanical, whatever. That's like, what can you do? I mean, we had other issues later, but this was a thing he came around on at some point. But did getting into engineering make me trans? No, I'm pretty sure no. I think there's one aspect of being transgender, and that is it just takes money. To actually do this, it's expensive. And it was expensive in the old days, and it's expensive now. And it's expensive to do it, and it is career destroying to do it also for some people, at least in the old days. So it was something you didn't want to do unless you were. It took some career confidence to do it. And I wonder now if the people, if just being an engineer makes you in a situation where you have the money to do it, and that was a filter for some people. Also, I would say, the other notable group of people who are transgender were sex workers. There's quite a few people doing various aspects of sex work and being transgender from that. But that wasn't me. I was the money from programming and money from science type. And that's how I paid for it. And I would say, and this isn't everyone, but I think for a lot of us, being trans meant being repressed, being having like urges that are put away at some point. And I think when you're in college or studying sciences, actually kind of works well with this. If you don't have any dating to do, or if you completely like put that away, it leaves more time to like grind on books and to work on your equations or whatever you got to do for school. I think you look at like sexual, like repression of gender issues or sexuality, things like this. It's like, I mean, you can let it destroy you, but I think there's another way to go, and that is you kind of look for something else to do. You got to put it away, and you just say, okay, I'm going to do something productive with my life, and and uh, that can be academics and science and engineering and things like this, and career, and and I think there's unhealthy consequences of this, but at least you do something. It's like at least you accomplish something in your life, so it's not a complete waste. And I think one thing about science and engineering is that if you have a job, however repressed you are, how unhappy you are, it's better with money. Everything's better with money. You can be repressed and broke, and that's not a good situation. For game development, I see in retrospect, how it kind of fits in a little bit with gender and sexual repression. That it's about, when you put these things off in college, a lot of these things turn inward, and a lot of your ideas go. A lot of your drives go into your imagination, into your kind of internal life, and things you imagine that may or may not be connected in any way to anything real or tangible. And I think making games is close to that. It's making games is sort of, even at the beginning, even in the 80s, making games was sort of building a world in a sense, and one that's it's not like a book that's static, but it has rules, and there's things that can respond in the game to the programming. I think the next level of that would be worlds that were occupied by more than a single player, and worlds where multiple people could connect to. And I think even in the 1980s, this was Dani Bunten. Dani Bunten was pushing multiplayer games at EA in the 80s, really before anyone else was. And partially the problem was technical, that in the 80s, there was no internet. You had modems and you had phone lines. And in order to connect to another person in a game, you would have to literally dial them up, and they would have to answer the phone and connect to each other. There was CompuServe and services like that, but they were quite expensive, and you had to pay per hour. So they weren't super great. And even, you dial on your phone, it was like you had a long distance phone bill unless you're talking to someone unless you're talking to someone nearby. So it was pretty hard to play a multiplayer game in the early 80s. I was pursuing a different obsession back then. I was obsessed with story and stuff like that. So I did eventually come to multiplayer in the early 90s when with Beyond Software, which became Stormfront Studios, with Games on America Online. I did bump into Dani Bunten a few times back in the day. I mean, she was a notch above me in terms of game development world status. She was her stuff was highly regarded. And in the 90s, I was sort of already creeping more into a pure engineering role for games. Those days, I was pretty active in the Computer Game Developer Conference. That group still meets in San Francisco, except now it's huge. But the old days, it met in San Jose or somewhere down there, somewhere in the South Bay. It was sort of like a con. It was smaller. And there's also a better chance of running into people you knew. So I just remember you'd hang in the hallways and see Richard Garriott and stuff like that would be chatting around and stuff. So you could get to talk to people much easier those days. Where I go now, I don't know anybody. I go to the Game Developer Conference, I'm wandering around with people I don't know. And then maybe I'll see someone. But I've gone there and I've met people I knew, and then I've gone there also times and I've met nobody. So it's gone both ways recently. Now the pandemic, nobody's going to any conference, so it's not happening. But I do remember, I think she called me. I do remember this. This is one of those weird memories because I think it was like I was recovering, and she had called me and talked about something. I don't remember. I think she was like, like I was sort of transgender ahead of her. So I just remember, I don't know if she wanted me to tell her things, but I probably failed in some horrible way. I don't know. I do know Dani transitioned super fast. She went from, she just, she was on a mission, and she went from hormones to surgery like in nothing. And for me, that wasn't me. I was like I was always distracted by other stuff, So I was living full time pretty early, but I was pretty slow. I saw later she did have some regrets later on. But I think she'd given up more. She had wife and children, all that kind of stuff, which wasn't my experience. I do remember in the 1990s. I remember I ran into her at a game conference, and she wanted to talk about trans stuff, but I kind of moved on, and I wanted to talk. I was more interested in game business, shop talk, stuff like that. But she was interested in that, so we were never really close. We were in the same circles. I was working on a game at 10.net, Dark Sun Online, and she was at an Empath, which was a competition to what became GameSpy. Like 10.net and Empath, they all sort of turned into GameSpy, which eventually got shut down. I saw her at a later game conference. I saw her, and she was still smoking, but she had a very bad cough. It was like a scary cough, and it was like something bad was happening, and that's the last I saw her. And she died of lung cancer pretty soon after that. I did meet Jamie Fenton. I've seen Jamie Fenton. I think. I still do see her on social media. I see her on LinkedIn, of all things. I know she had some success later in life. I think she was trying to get back into games, I think she was trying to put together something. I'm not sure if she ever finished that or not. There's another, Jessica Mulligan. I don't remember. I talked to her quite a bit, too. She was kind of another one of the trans game people. And she was... I think she created a game. I think she worked for Genie or worked with the games group at the Genie online system. And we chatted quite a bit on Genie game development forum. That before the internet, before even AOL, there was Genie, and a lot of game develop. It was Chris Crawford created a game developer forum, and it was actually pretty good. And there were quite a few people who worked in the business. We talked about game stuff, and we argued about the same old stuff, the stories versus gameplay and all these kind of things, It was sort of like Chris Crawford's kind of little orbit. And he was interested in story, and he was working on sort of super ambitious projects. I'm sure I've forgotten somebody. Maybe there are other trans game people back from those days, But so if you know, please mention in the comments somebody I've forgotten who should have mentioned. I would just say what's going on here? I would say just as a sample of one for me, and I wouldn't apply this to anyone else. But to me, it kind of rings true that from my experience, that this connection between science, engineering, and game development are kind of related to being trans, and that it's connected to that repression, kind of repression of kind of impression of internal drives, and that it was seeking out like another outlet for that. And so that's what it came. It's like, it's my living now, and I'm fine with this. I can accept that. Anyway, I think that's all I have. I'm gonna stop here. Thanks for watching.